What's one piece of advice you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur?
I've had lots of conversations, led lots of workshops around making it on your own. And if I sort of take that broadly around entrepreneurship, a lot of people are afraid to jump off that proverbial cliff, right? I have the paycheck, life is stable. Maybe it's not what I want. I'm not pursuing my dreams, but I'm providing for my family or myself. I just got to a point specifically at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and this is specifically after sort of the 9/11 era of big firm consulting. I just believed I'd rather bet on myself, right? And it was safer for me to get out and look at the upside potential if I do it well.
Welcome to A Founder's Life. I'm your host, Leo Gestetner. On this show, we dive into the real stories behind the highs and lows of entrepreneurship and how we pursue a more balanced and meaningful life along the way. This podcast is sponsored by Thanks, helping founders like us scale with reliable remote talent. I'll share more about that later. But if you email founders@thanks.com with the subject line, A Founder's Life, you'll get $1,000 off your first month. Now, I'm excited to be joined by Jeremy Lurey. Jeremy, great to have you here. Please kick things off by introducing yourself to our audience.
Thanks, Leo. Looking forward to the conversation. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeremy Lurey. I travel from the Los Angeles area as I speak to it with a national client base. And for the last, 25 to 30 years now, I have been living in the space of helping people live more fulfilled lives. And that started at work as an organizational psychologist. That has morphed into being a family business advisor and helping significant families transfer their wealth between generations and raise their next generation of family leaders. I grew up in the Los Angeles area. I'm meant to be by the water. I went to school in Chicago, got my 4 years of winter at Lake Michigan, my ocean away from home, and I am looking forward to the rest of our chat here today.
Well, thank you. And tell us a little bit about your journey that brought you on a work perspective to where you are now.
Sure. It's interesting. I was just telling someone this the other day. It started at Northwestern in Chicago. I was a freshman in my spring quarter, and I grew up very privileged. I will just say that. My father was a very successful attorney, worked with one of the largest law firms in the world, and he provided for us. Now, I may have missed him as somewhat of an absent father being a workaholic, but I truly benefited from his commitment and sacrifice at work. And so here I am walking onto my college campus, undeclared as my major, thinking I'm not going to be my dad, right? I don't want to be that workaholic. I don't want to be a corporate attorney. I didn't have a background in technology or finance. And I just sort of found myself in the space of caring about people. And that's psychology, it's communications, it's leadership. And that has really been the thread that has continued ever since that day of walking on campus. I started in big firm consulting after getting my PhD in organizational psychology, spent many years with Fortune 500 companies and, sort of brand names that we all would know. And somewhere along the way decided I didn't want to be living that life, didn't have the balance, didn't like being told where to go and what to do and when by my partners. And I started my own consulting practice in 2002. And, not quite 25 years later from then, I've had some incredible highs. I've had some incredible lows. I try to navigate as best I can, looking at the future of where our clients need us and where we can deliver value. And we have launched 2 different divisions within the main consulting practice over that 20 plus years. And I continue to do some really rewarding work with families. Some of my favorite clients from their young 20s, right? I mean, I have such a diverse sort of work life at this point. But one thing I know we're going to get into later, I've never wanted it to be me, right? My middle initial is S. I could be JSL Associates, right? I could be the Lurey Consulting Group. I've never wanted it to be me. I've always wanted to surround myself with other great consultants and advisors and create my own sort of chosen family beyond my nuclear family. And so I look forward to sharing some of those stories of how to build a firm that is more than just me. As much as I know it's my energy that drives it, it's all the people around me who serve our clients and sort of fulfill me at work.
I love that. I love that you get to work with people of all ages and really help them, helping people in their 20s prepare for what it looks like for the rest of their lives and financially. I love your point of incredible highs and incredible lows. I mean, that's the entrepreneurial journey. That really is. It's and anyone who thinks the entrepreneurial journey is easy has definitely never been an entrepreneur.
I didn't know what entrepreneurship was. I had a PhD in psychology. I did some work in big firm consulting. And in 2002, I jumped off the cliff because I felt that I could do it better and it was safer to lead on my own. We won an Inc. 5000 award in 2009 for being one of the fastest growing private companies in America the 3 years prior. And it was Chris Gardner who was giving a speech at sort of a wine cocktail hour. For anyone who is a movie fan, the Will Smith movie, Pursuit of Happiness. For those of you who are avid readers, unlike myself, you actually probably read Chris Gardner's book, The Pursuit of Happiness. Either way, you found that material. And he defined entrepreneurship in a really powerful way. He said, if you have covered payroll out of your back pocket, congratulations, you're an entrepreneur. And I've done that more times than I can count over the years. Not necessarily something I'm proud of or I strive for, but it happens in this entrepreneurial journey. And so it's really just taught me to treat my business like a business and to sort of grind it out, put my head down and focus on what matters most to get through, whether it is a recession, a pandemic, a loss of a client, whatever it might be. Small to mid-market businesses are going to go through some struggles and some setbacks. And for me, I believe in sort of sweat equity and perseverance to get through that.
Yeah, I think, the entrepreneurial journey, there's been many times over the years that my staff have received a paycheck and I haven't.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's the pleasure of it. Yes, hopefully with the highs, you do very well. But with the lows, the staff still get looked after. So, and talk a little more about what you're actually doing for your clients in your current business.
Sure.
Your
as I said,
you've been doing now for 2 decades plus, I think you said.
Yeah. As I said, we sort of have 3 different divisions. We started with a management consulting firm, and our background is really around people, organizations, more of the human resources and culture performance of a company. And so I have some consultants who work on that, more of what you'd call corporate consulting, whether it's a family owned and operated company or it's a multi-billion dollar Fortune 500 company. It doesn't really matter. That's a body of work. I found myself in a CEO peer group back in the, call it 2008 to 2010 timeframe, really looking in the mirror and doing some soul searching on what did I want to be when I grew up. And being chief rainmaker and growing a firm was really cool for a while, but it wasn't fulfilling, right? I've now got 25 to 30 consultants on payroll. We now have these massive clients that if any one of them goes away, we're in trouble. And so I started diversifying into more of my passion for executive coaching. And so now I'm working with business owners and CEOs and their executive teams doing strategic planning work. And I thought that was the cool and sexy part of what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I've had clients who, I won't use a company name, but we'll just say are GMs of prominent hotel properties in Vail, as an example. And that's a pretty cool place to wake up in the morning to do some work. Or, C-suite of global tech companies that we were talking about earlier before we started. And so I thought that was it. But the more I was working with these family enterprises, I got pulled into the succession planning between, dad is aging out and junior's never run a company before, or I'm leading a strategic planning retreat for a family. And at the end of that, they go, this was really amazing. Do you ever do this with families? Right. And so I got pulled into this family advisory space. And so my passion, where I tend to connect with my clients directly as an advisor, is trying to make sure they can be thankful at Thanksgiving. Being an American and celebrating that holiday here, so many families struggle and can't sit down at a dinner table on Sunday night, let alone, sort of a milestone holiday like that every year. And so I work with parent generations who tend to be the owners of these companies. I work with the rising generation who are the up and comers. Some may work in the business where it's family owned and operated. Some may just be passive owners and shareholders in the future, or they're the beneficiaries of their trusts. And so it's in that space of keeping families connected between family branches and between family generations that I tend to focus. But as I said, we have a broader consulting group that does some other work, MBAs who do business strategy, corporate consultants who do more performance management. That's just not where I tend to focus my direct energy.
And it sounds like that's a nice diverse mix you get to do. So you're not stuck into doing the same thing every day. You get to do a few different things.
Right.
And we've also, as my company Thanks has been lucky to have you as a customer for 6 plus months, and love to sort of hear how that's helped you in your journey and how that sort of global remote teams has really helped.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been not quite a year that we've had Carla by my side. And I say it that way on purpose because she really supports me more directly. The amazing thing about being an entrepreneur and having a national client base, for I've got one international family and I go to Geneva once a year for a weekend. I can be on a plane out of communication from the world, land, and just see all this activity. My client meetings are scheduled or rescheduled. Invoices are sent out. Payments are received. People actually think that I'm active on LinkedIn, and I probably shouldn't say that on a podcast, but the reality is that between the two of us, we find content to share. Carla's the one who's at a desk, all day long and able to manage that for me. So I'm present in the world, even when I'm, quite frankly, maybe on vacation with my wife and not on email and not paying attention to that stuff. So it's been amazing for me as a small business owner to stay productive. And in my world, I only pay myself $1 if I bill $1, right? So to stay productive from a meeting scheduling perspective is critical. Otherwise, I don't make that dollar, right? And the firm doesn't make that dollar. So I'm a firm believer that there's no right size. You don't have to be $1 billion company. There's no right time. You don't have to be in business for 10 years. Anyone sort of at our level of entrepreneur, founder experience needs an assistant. Now, in my experience, you didn't ask for the plug for thanks per se, but, I've had a lot of assistants over the last 12 years, I would say, mostly in person, on premise, full-time types of employees. And then at one point moved to sort of virtual assistants around the country, but again, still on payroll and still receiving benefits and those things. We have struggled so much in the last few years with US based talent and whatever the cycles of life they may be going through, whether it's sort of out of college or new mom or in between things, whatever it is, just we've had such a struggle. And so for you to be able to search the world to find people who want to sit at a desk at home and manage someone else's life is such a gift, because I don't need to worry about setting up an LLC for tax purposes in Tennessee anymore. And I don't have to pay lawyers to process things for the state of Michigan and all those places where we might have to domicile with, a US based employed assistant. Instead, I just get a phenomenal person at an incredibly competitive rate. And she loves the work that she gets to do. And I could not be any more appreciative of what she does to enable my life.
That's great to hear. And I think, I always say to people, if you don't have an assistant, then you're the most expensive assistant in the company.
Absolutely. I used to have a business coach and it drove me nuts. I just wanted to wring his neck every time he'd say this, but he would literally ask the question, whose job are you doing right now? And there's nothing that's beneath me. I can change the paper and the printer, right? But when I am updating my own calendar, when I'm doing my own travel, when I am posting my own content to LinkedIn, just all those things that someone who is more desk-based can do quicker, more efficiently, more effectively. I should not be journaling into our financials that we've received payments. And so all of those tasks that can be delegated are not the best use of my time, including, and I call you used to say, Jeremy, if you have an assistant, you can just read a book, right? I don't have to bill one more hour to my clients. I can just sit and read a book and recharge or listen to a podcast like this to learn rather than spend that half an hour doing something very tactical. So I've embraced that over the last 12, 13 years now. And I'm truly blessed to have someone like Carla who commits her life to supporting my life in any number of ways, whether it's in the business or, as I said, allowing me to go read a book.
I love that. Now, talking about family, what does family mean to you?
I was thinking about this and preparing for today. Sort of family hits me in two different ways. I'll start business because we've been there, and I'll move into sort of my core family, which is really the question you're asking. But I heard a talk once with Daniel Pink, who's very well-recognized leadership author, lots of books out there. And he made this comment that when you're a business owner and when you hire someone into your business, you are, in essence, creating family. That if you are not prepared to treat that person like your child, as if you are a parent, that you're missing an opportunity. And so I've really embraced that my work family is really important to me. We have consultants come and go, different things happen in their lives or with different client projects. But the people who are my core, they're my core. And, I have taken enough psychology tests over the years to know I have a high need for affiliation. As I said earlier, I never wanted this to be the Lurey Consulting Group. I wanted this to be a larger team. And so I'm truly blessed and privileged to have the people by my side who choose to work with me because that's a choice. And so that's part of who I am and part of who my family is. On the other side, probably more of the question you'd expect me to answer. I'm married. I have 2 children. They're both in their 20s. They have moved away. One lives in Boston now. One lives in Boulder, Colorado, and will likely never leave there as he was still skiing this weekend and hiking in the rain for the last 3 days, taking pictures of elk in the groves. That's the life that he lives. And part of how I get to work the way I do now is because I don't have children at home, right? I don't have the dependents around me. My wife is the youngest of 6 children in a Mexican American family where that heritage means something and family and the values. So we are also blessed that our 2 nieces live with us. And that's not by chance. My wife has opened up our home if we had 2 other bedrooms. And so now they're both in their 30s and very self-sufficient and will actually cook dinner and do dishes, unlike my children ever would do. But, our family is a little bit bigger than just our core family. All of our parents are still alive, still live in the Los Angeles area. So we get to see and stay connected with our broader family. But that sort of means everything to me at this point in my life. I shared earlier my workaholic father. And as much as I do love him and appreciate what he did, I had a very different childhood coming up. Now I schedule travel and client meetings where my kids are, or I'll go out of my way if I'm in DC to go take the 1-hour flight to Boston. My daughter just moved there earlier this year, having been in Oregon before that. And so I really pride myself on that quality time with my kids. There's a horrible statistic out there, and I haven't done the research, but I heard this. By the time, at least in the US, by the time our children turn 18, we will have lived 90% of our experience with them, right? Because you think about them, waking them up in the morning and driving them to school and all that. By the time they leave and go to college and typically don't come back home, we've got about 10% of their life experience left with them. And so I think that's cherished time to be able to be a father still and have them care about me and want to spend time with me. And I'll be in Denver this weekend and get to take my son to an incredible dinner on Sunday night before a board meeting starts on Monday, and so I pride myself on that. At the same time, I'll say we just celebrated my wife's birthday for 10 days in Lake Tahoe, which for those who don't know, it's sort of on the Nevada-California border, beautiful lake, beautiful mountains to go hiking. And so I spend a lot of time with my wife when I'm not traveling for work, just trying to be with her because we don't get as much time together for what I would argue are more of the common family experiences during the week, given my business travel.
So it seems like you're finding some good ways to fit family in with everything. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And how does health look for you? So whether that be the mental health, physical health, nutrition, how's health look for you?
Health's a great question. You and I didn't know each other, say, 15 years ago when I had run several half marathons, was starting to get involved in triathlons. My wife was in the entertainment industry here in Los Angeles, and their studio supported the Malibu Triathlon, where I live in Malibu. And that benefited Children's Hospital LA with over $1 million a year of funding through everything that we raised those races. And I loved that time in my life. Swimming, water's my happy place for sure. I'm not the best cyclist, but I can run, a few miles. And so I had fitness when I was more chief rainmaker and selling work for other people. The last 5 years, though, where I've really increased my travel to being on a plane almost every week, and not uncommon, this next week I'll be in both Denver and San Francisco, so multiple cities back to back. My health is not what it used to be. I go through phases of being much more rigorous with my food intake and trying to sleep better. And then I go through phases of what I just call sort of road warrior depression and eating food and free drinks on airplanes or in hotels or, sort of airport lounges. And so my health is not where I would like it to be, but I appreciate it is where it is for a lot of reasonable reasons. But the one thing I do hold on to now, I would say, going back to your comment on mental health, right? So I'm much more present. I'm much more sort of appreciative of what I do have. I acknowledge what I don't have. I make the best of what I can. I'm not in control of every aspect of my life right now. If I'm getting on a plane 1, 2, 3 times this week between cities, right? So I do what I can to enjoy those moments, and where I have a chance to work out a little bit more when I'm at home. We actually have a red light therapy that's good for my body and aches and pains and all that. And we have a tonal machine, so sort of a virtual personal trainer system that they have in place. And I will take those workouts on the road with my iPad. And so I do what I can when I can, but I also give myself the breaks, recognizing that I don't have the same workout regimens that others might, or sort of nutrition behavior and habits that others might.
Fair enough. It's about recognizing it and working on creating those healthy habits. They don't need to be a daily thing, but it's working out what works for you.
Yeah.
And what do you like to do for fun?
For me, there's not a whole lot of fun as far as hobbies in my life. I live a sort of very scattered life, whether it's traveling for work, traveling for fun, whether it's, sort of working late or getting up early. So for me, the one thing that really just puts a smile on my face is travel. It's being somewhere beautiful, being away from home. As much as I live in a beautiful place, and I realize many would celebrate that I live on vacation in Malibu, getting away to Lake Tahoe, going somewhere special with my wife. Last year for anniversary, we did a Northern Lights trip. We were in Sweden for several days and then Iceland. Just being out in nature somewhere different from where we usually are. And that quality time to connect with family or with friends. It could be a big family trip to Cancun. This past time with my wife, it was bringing some friends up to Tahoe to celebrate her birthday with her. So that's really where fun comes in for me. And, that question of balance, people always ask if my life can be scattered. I had a colleague once tell me there's no such thing as work-life balance in any given moment. Right now, you and I are working, right? And later tonight, we might be living, to use that word. So for me, it's about having balance in totality. So I just got, the better part of 10 days off while I did some work in the middle of those weeks there. I may be working hard and grinding for the next 10 days. And, later this month, we get to spend 4 days in Big Sky, Montana. It'll be work with one of the CEO peer groups I lead. But I mean, how beautiful in the middle of summer to be in Big Sky, Montana. So I think it's that change of scenery, that travel to different places to experience new things that really adds to my fun and joy. And recognizing that I may work until midnight tonight if that's my choice, but I also just had this incredible time with my wife and a bunch of friends up in Lake Tahoe. So I don't complain about the working hard because I get the benefit of the playing hard as well.
And I do agree with what you were saying about a balanced life. For me, I always say it's that center line. So there's the ups and downs. So a balanced
Yes.
life, unless you're a Buddhist monk, you're not permanently in balance. But it's finding what that balanced life looks for you. And at some points that's working way too hard, and other times it's playing hard, and other times it's just switching off and spending time with family or whatever it is. But it's what it's that balance overall. Yeah, it's not a permanent balance by any means. And what has been a pivotal moment in your life?
Gosh, I can think of many. Going through divorce is not fun. I'm a firm believer that things happen for a reason and that there's happiness for everyone. And it's not always your current context. And sometimes you need to change your context. And regardless of whose decision it might be within a partnership, I've been through what I'll call sort of near bankruptcy situations in my firm where I was completely overextended against a line of credit because I had never had commercial credit. I just had a house and you have a home equity line of credit. And after every few years, you refinance it and move forward. I had a moment where a chief credit officer from our bank called and said she was calling the line. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, you haven't, honored your covenants. And I said, what do you mean? Like, I had no idea what covenants were, right? My banker who signed off on the loan had never told me you have to pay it down to zero once a year, kind of a covenant. And I think for many, that would have been a heart attack moment. And it could have been, honestly, without being too grim, I mean, a suicidal moment of looking at that debt and what I had to pay off. But that's just not the way I'm wired. And for a lot of different reasons, I just believe in sort of failure is not an option and one foot in front of the other. And so, that moment in particular was probably 2010, maybe late 2009, early 2010. And so for me, 15 years later, to be celebrating where I'm at in my life just, tells you that you chip away at it a little bit. But those pivotal moments absolutely shift perspective. We've had some loss in our family over the last few years. Those moments of losing someone far too young and far too fast sort of changes your perspective. I think maybe one that I'll leave you with. So my father had planned to celebrate his 70th birthday with family in South Africa. We've never done an African safari. We've never been to South Africa. I have a lot of friends who grew up there, and we were looking forward to this. Well, he had what was meant to be just a simple heart valve replacement turned into a triple bypass. He had open chest cavity for 22 hours. I have no idea how clinicians can be so superhuman, but they are. And that was written up in the journals, as you can imagine, as an exceptional case. My father will never get to live a day in Africa. He will never get to see a zebra or a rhinoceros in the wild. And so moments like that, I choose to live my life to the fullest, however we define that, and not wait until I'm old enough or until I retire or sort of. So as you said earlier, I mean, my wife and I traveling or am I spending time with my kids? It's important for me to do now what I can because we don't know if there will be a not now. Life is short as much as we think it'll be long. And we only are physically able to do so much for so long. And so we just kind of continue to live this very rich and blessed life now, knowing at some point we will have to make different choices and may not be able to physically, financially, mentally, what have you.
That's so true. I actually, last 2 months ago, my parents were actually in Los Angeles for my daughter's graduation, and we managed to tick something off my father's bucket list, which was visiting Yosemite. It was lovely to be able to do something he's always wanted to do, and yeah, that was pretty special to be able to do with him.
Yeah, that's incredible.
What's one piece of advice you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur?
I've had lots of conversations, led lots of workshops around making it on your own. And if I sort of take that broadly around entrepreneurship, a lot of people are afraid to jump off that proverbial cliff, right? I have the paycheck, life is stable. Maybe it's not what I want. I'm not pursuing my dreams, but I'm providing for my family or myself. I just got to a point specifically at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and this is specifically after sort of the 9/11 era of big firm consulting. I just believed I'd rather bet on myself. Right. And it was safer for me to get out and look at the upside potential if I do it well. So for anyone, regardless of what your job might be, if you're thinking of launching something, I would just offer start sooner and take the baby steps. So in my case, I had back in the time, let's just call it $100,000 line of credit on the house that if I wasn't able to sell work, I knew I wasn't going to lose my home. Right. I have colleagues where they were saving to buy a home. So they had that, I'm making up the $100,000, whatever the number might be, but they had that nest egg that they decided, I don't need to buy a condo. I can keep renting for another year. I will use that as my backstop. And so making sure that you have some financial security, I think is critical for those early days. It'll take at least 2, 3, 4, 5 years for you to start to get liftoff. And so I always talk about sort of, we all get on planes, that pre-check diagnosis that captains have to do, that sort of throttling of the engines, and it gets a little turbulent before you take off. And a lot of people, I think, just get fed up and quit and think they're going to make it happen overnight. This is absolutely a long path. This is not sort of a quick hit. And so people who don't have some financial security, I think after 3-6 months, they have to throw in the towel and go back to looking for a job. So I think that's really important. The other piece I would share is just sort of, what's your North Star? I mean, I have a lighthouse behind me. I truly believe if we know where we're going, we are far more likely to get there. The lighthouse for me has always been that friendly form of feedback that every 30 seconds or every minute, whatever the cycle is, that light comes around and says, hey, I'm here, right? And so as long as you know where you're going, someone once sort of brought up in a training session, Jeremy, are you a sailor? I said, well, I sailed as a kid. She said, well, have you ever thought about what happens when you reach your lighthouse? Anyone who's ever been on a boat knows you've run ashore. Right. So the lighthouse can be aspirational. It can be inspirational. It's not necessarily a finish line to ever reach. Because if you ever run your boat ashore, that's a bad thing. But for those who are, I'll call it pre-entrepreneurial and thinking about that step, if you have some of the security to make the leap, I would just be clear on where you're going. What does success look like? What is that goal for fulfillment? Because if you're not fulfilled, it's just another job, right? And it's not worth doing. Even if you have some high highs, there will be some low lows. And so you need to make sure you're on the path that you want to be on if you're going to make that leap.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate having you with us today and sharing your thoughts and opinions on things and your journey.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. And how can people find you?
So easiest way to go to the parent company, which is the one that I started in 2002, plusdelta.net. That's PLUSDELTA.net. Or you can email me directly, JS like Scott, LUREY @plusdelta.net. I'm, of course, on LinkedIn and share resources there as well. So that's an easy place to find me. Just Jeremy, Jeremy, Lurey, Lurey in your LinkedIn search bar.
Well, thank you.